Hello and welcome to our Tech and Sec Weekly and MySecurityTV. This is our Bugcrowd series and this is our CISO Perspectives with Bugcrowd. Today we're joined by Nick Mckenzie, the Chief Information and Security Officer. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Yes, Chris. Always a pleasure, mate.
And today's CISO, the Deputy CISO with SEEK, Ryan Roche. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Ryan, look, you've got a fascinating sort of enterprise to protect there, and Deputy CISO probably gets most of the work anyway, right? I imagine the CISO just hands everything over to you. So, look, maybe introduce us to SEEK. Most of us who have a job these days would have potentially used SEEK or gone through SEEK anyway, but it's a big platform, a lot of information there, people's private information as well. So you've obviously got a frontline position. Introduce us to the role as Deputy CISO, and then we'll work through your Bugcrowd integration as well.
Yeah, sure. So my role, I'm relatively new in role. I've been at SEEK just a little under 6 months. It's a new role to the organisation, so there's probably been an aspect of feeling it out and working out where I can add value. But I think the best way we sort of describe the role internally is I'm kind of like that COO to the CISO, Liam, my boss. So getting involved in a lot of things like helping mature processes, building up our internal capabilities around engaging with the business, and just jumping in where and when there's fires to be fought.
Do you find you mentioned it's a relatively new role? So the CISO needed someone, you mentioned COO, operationally, a bit more hands-on, a bit more responsive?
Yeah, I think where I would add value is obviously that CISO role is extraordinarily broad and busy. There's strategic, there's operational capabilities required. So really, I just provide that cover fire really for the CISO and jump into the detail a little bit more where he might not have the opportunity to really dive in.
I think the other aspect is the company is growing, right? So it's a fast growing and online business. How's the office structured? Did it require any other restructures within the team, bringing in a deputy?
No. So I've just slotted in really. So we've largely kept the team intact in the way that it was when I joined, which was great. It's nice to come in and not cause too much disruption.
And we've heard from other CISOs. How have you structured the team? Is it structured into sort of different workflows or different aspects of the IT structure?
Yeah, so we've aligned across 5 leadership team members under the CISO. So we have offensive security, we have our threat intelligence function, our security operations function, product and cloud, and then we have corporate security. So they're sort of the 5 pillars. And then under myself as a reporting line also sits our culture and awareness function.
Wow. Okay. Nice. And maybe let's introduce Bugcrowd in that regards. So I take it that might come under maybe product and cloud.
No, it actually comes under offensive security for us.
Okay, there we go. It was a good guess. But yeah, so defensive, how's that kind of working, and how long have you been working with Bugcrowd?
Look, we're a long-time customer of Bugcrowd. I actually don't have the number of years, and I know it predates our head of offensive security, but I believe it's 6 or 7 years that we've been a customer. Yeah. So yeah, we're a long-time customer. We've got quite a mature program. We really love partnering with Bugcrowd. We get a lot out of it.
Nice. Nick, I understand you know Ryan quite well, but yeah, how have you what's the working relationship here between Bugcrowd and SEEK?
Yeah, I've known Ryan a long time, as we sort of talked about before, right? The little quip around his dad saving my life when I was about 6 years of age. Maybe that did start off the working relationship in some weird way.
But what's an interesting note, your Commodore 64 was my introduction to computers that really whet my appetite for technology. That's how far back it goes.
Yeah, there you go. So Ryan and I used to jam a lot around the streets, family friends, playing each other's computers, that sort of stuff.
But obviously, Seek, as Ryan sort of indicated, has been using Bugcrowd for a while. So that relationship hasn't brought in a commercial relationship here. Seek has been entrusted to Bugcrowd for some time.
It has, and look, even predates my time at Bugcrowd as well, right? As sort of Ryan mentioned, Seek's been with Bugcrowd for sort of 6 or 7 years now, which is a great testament to the outcomes, I suppose, that we're giving them in turn. Obviously, we're an impact type of company. We submit, with accuracy and validity, massive and a lot of vulnerabilities across customers' platforms and attack surface. So the fact that Seek has been with us for 6 or 7 years plus, to me it's a great story in itself, right? Great in terms of our workflow and the outcomes that we give.
So I mentioned, you mentioned, sorry, Ryan, on defensive. It sits in your defensive team.
Offensive.
I beg your pardon. Offensive. That makes a bit more sense in terms of, so that's your sort of ongoing red and blue teaming exercises back against yourselves, right? Is that how it's been used? And how does that relate back to sort of my first guess of product and cloud as that gets developed and testing that? So maybe just talk us through the thinking here and how it actually helps the business.
Yeah, sure. So our offensive security team runs a few different capabilities. So you mentioned red teaming. That's certainly something we do. We also do a lot of internal penetration testing. We're really proud of the capability and the people we've got in that function. And then in addition to that, there's that complementary aspect of Bugcrowd that plugs in really nicely to that in terms of discovering vulnerabilities within our platform. They face out to the program. They help administer it. They triage things from our end, and then they'll work with the appropriate parties within the organisation to find a home and to get those things remediated and looked at. So that's probably the reason why it sits with offensive security and not just strictly cloud and product, because while that is our core business and a big footprint for us, we are a large corporate as well. So we have things that span just beyond a footprint with our product in terms of our corporate systems to run our business.
I suppose the other aspect is that duration of time. That's quite some period of time. I think you said potentially up to 8 years, but at least let's say 5 years. That's a long program. How do you sort of develop up that workflow on an ongoing basis? Is that driven from you at your side, or you work very closely with the account manager at Bugcrowd to work out, okay, what's the next priority? Because nothing's stagnant, right? It sounds like that's an ongoing business as systems change and get upgraded.
Yeah, 100%. So we go through that process in that dialogue with Bugcrowd in terms of constantly evaluating those scopes and the nature of our programs. That's been a little bit of a journey. So we run a number of different programs for different assets. So we're a business that's grown a lot over the years, not just organically, but also through acquisitions and through the development of complementary products and things like that. So we've worked very closely with Bugcrowd around refining those programs. So usually the process we take is our core platform and what people really know us for well across the APAC region. That's a very mature program that's been public for some time now. But when we go through the process of perhaps acquiring an asset or building a new asset, what we'll typically do is once we've put it through the ringer with our own internal offensive security capability in terms of pen testings and things like that, we will then graduate that to a private program and build some maturity there. So what we don't want to do is with an asset that's still growing in maturity, we don't want to just go public with that immediately and open up the fire hose and get an amount of work that we're unable to deal with. So we sort of go through that graduated process where we start private, just keep chipping away, keep discovering things, remediating things, getting ourselves into a really good posture with a view of in the longer term getting us public with that asset and getting that next level of assurance.
Nice. Nick, that's a good point on the public-private of this. sounds like the client's got scope to control how much they release, right? And also who kind of comes in from a researcher viewpoint, who has a look at their system and can attack it. Can you just talk us through the public-private aspect?
Yeah, I mean, before we talk about the public-private, what Ryan just described is very common for organisations, right? More so on the augmentation aspect or point that he raised with his teams, in terms of getting the internal teams to test it first, graduating, I think was the word that Ryan used, into a private type of program, and then graduation again more to a public program once there's an element of trust. I think for a lot of the customers that we do, it's a common step change that they go as part evolution as part of their security maturity journey and offensive security plan. That being that usually the common approach is internal development, testing with internal security teams and resources, and then again that promotion once there's a degree of trust or check boxes, making it public to the eyes of the consumers that would use that technology. We traditionally come in place on the right hand side. You obviously hear that term shift left and right. Yeah. Where we're essentially on the right-hand side. But we do have a lot of programs more recently that have been spinning up in the last couple of years that have actually been imbuing the crowd more so on the left-hand side, right? As part of augmenting the internal offensive security resources and testing earlier within the development life cycle. So that's become a bit of a thing. As well, and then of course testing on the right hand side. But to answer your question, Chris, yeah, look, when we go through those motions with the customers, the SEEKs of the world, it's like what Ryan said, right? We just need to understand the projects that are coming up with them. We have an account management team and a TCMS team that deals with that on a BAU basis. And once they either release a new product, they release new assets, there's that time to promote them from a private or a public program. We're there to support them in that journey, right? So it's very much a white glove type of approach that we have with the customer. It's not like we just, we set them off with the program and then on you go for the next year. It's very much step change. It's very much working with them, QBRs every quarter, making sure that there is that constant dialogue with the customer to take them through that journey.
I've got a couple of questions on both, really. I suppose one is, Ryan, are you finding you're picking up those early vulnerabilities? Is there a trend to those that you start to see? And then also budget allocation. We'll come back to budget allocation, I think, between public and private. But yeah, do you tend to see sort of trends as you start your bug bounty program and you go, oh, okay, yep, we've either had that one before or yeah, what's the learning process, I suppose, and the trends, the trend observations?
We definitely do observe trends. And actually one thing we try to get out of that is we feed that into our culture and our awareness. So what we ensure we're doing, that if we are seeing things that do reoccur and there are themes to things, we ensure that we're going out there and talking with our development teams, making them aware of that, and ensuring that we're not making those same systemic mistakes over and over. So yeah, for us, it's a great data point to feed into that culture and education piece for Uplift.
It's very important, and naturally you get better, and so there's almost a sense of training to this as well, right?
Most definitely, yeah, most definitely. And talking about training, actually, one of the great benefits we get out of the platform is using it as a bit of a proving ground for more junior people. So it's always hard to grow and acquire talent. So one of the great things we've got out of the platform is by getting people on our end to start triaging, validating, replicating the stuff that's being submitted, we're actually finding that's a really great method for us to get people up to speed and learning and improving our internal capabilities on the back of it.
Nice. What about sort of up the food chain as well towards the executives and directors? Do they get insights into this as well and go just so they can get an appreciation of the important role that you have?
Yeah, absolutely, to some degree. One thing that we've really leaned into in recent times is improving that visibility of the vulnerabilities in our platform. So not just stuff coming purely out of Bugcrowd, but really aggregating that view of all vulnerabilities. We put a lot of time and effort into building a platform where we can surface that into one singular place. Really drive that visibility so we can get that in front of execs and say, look, this is your estate and your landscape, and here's how you sit in terms of vulnerabilities, how old they are, how critical they are, and things like that. We've really seen that visibility is driving some really good behaviour now, where people can see where they sit. To some degree, and I think probably the next step is gamifying a little bit and creating a little bit of competition to say, hey, they're green and you're amber. What are you going to do about it?
Nice. Well, that does sort of come back to budget as well. Do you have an allocated set budget, or does it adapt to the risk and program that you've got?
Yeah, we do. So as part of that financial planning, we allocate a bucket to our different programs at the start of the year. That said, we put a lot of value in doing this, and I believe there's been instances historically where we have breached that allocated budget, but we've just gone and sought a top up just because we really want to keep that program going and that continuous testing. We want to keep people active and engaged with our program, and that's where we get the value.
We're obviously getting a return, otherwise you wouldn't make the spend. But Nick, the public-private aspect, and we talked about that evolution, is, how any guidance on budget? Is private more expensive? And I take it the client still sets the bounty, but what's your views on budget allocation, public versus private bounties?
It's case by case, right? Obviously, depending on the size of the company, the assets that are in scope, and whatever. You can't put a number on if a private program is bigger than a public. What I can say, though, is in terms of, again, we talked about the evolution of going from a private to a public program, very much of a crawl, walk, run type of approach. Usually, most companies that sort of work with us, I'd say 90% of them start obviously in a private capacity. Once they get that maturity, once they get that trust with the community, they migrate and they evolve into the public program, where the public program is effectively opening up the floodgates to all the hackers around the world to submit further. So the volume that you get from a public traditionally is obviously more than a private. Private meaning it's got a smaller community of hackers and researchers on that. The public obviously opening it up pretty much to the world. So from a back-end process perspective, when you do go public, one thing that customers should note is you need to have your internal processes, your internal triage capabilities, your workflows, your feedback loops into the app dev side of the house, pretty much bang on and working, right? And I think that's one of the points. A lot of people don't go straight to public straight away. They're a bit fearful that they're going to get swamped with submissions, right? And they don't have the internal capacity to deal with it, right? So a lot of customers, I'm not saying all, a lot of customers that are at a point of low to medium type of maturity would take that more cautious approach in terms of starting small, starting private, and then growing out, both from a coverage perspective, but also growing and tuning out their internal processes accordingly, and people accordingly.
Well, that's a good point. I suppose you need those internal structures. Ryan, maybe what's your KPIs? How do you measure internally the program, and do you have someone dedicated? Are you the one responsible, or is there someone responsible specifically?
So we run a shared responsibility model. So responsibility for our program sits right across that offensive security team. We're very much a Slack-driven organisation. So the front door into that for us is an integration directly with the Bugcrowd platform.
Yeah.
And when things are submitted to us, that'll actually go into a Slack channel where somebody in the offensive security team can pick that up. We've also got a direct integration with Jira. So effectively what happens is we get the notification that comes in via Slack. That'll go into Jira. Someone will pick that up. They will triage that and validate that and write that up, put that internal Seek context across it, and then that'll go straight into Jira for the applicable team and developers and over to them, submitted as a bug and prioritised for them to work on.
Very good. And KPIs, so how you report to the CISO?
So a couple. I talked a little bit about that really close tracking of vulnerabilities right across the organisation. So that's a really key one for us in terms of putting an SLA or an SLO on these things, and how quickly are we burning down and remediating those. We also track ourselves on how quickly we are to triage and pay out submissions, because that's really important, right? We really want to keep the crowd engaged. We want to be a good partner to work with, and our program to be well regarded and for people to engage with it. So one thing we try to do is turn that around really quickly. We don't want things being submitted and getting stale and having us sit on it and having researchers getting frustrated at that. So that's something we track as well.
Very good. Nick, maybe come back to that Slack integration. Is it a common thing for clients, or as you say, they need that loop workflow? That sounds like an ideal one, and I'm aware Bugcrowd uses Slack.
Yeah, we've got many integrations, whether it's interfacing integrations with us directly and our support team, or whether it's supporting our platform integrations with more the back-end workflows to the app dev teams to close and fix the issues that once it's been triaged by an internal offensive security team such as SIX, right? It's very common to have that. Obviously, the customers want that. That's a big driver. They want straight-through vulnerability management. They don't want manual blocks in the road, right? They want either click-through type of submissions. They want it seamless. They want it to be frictionless, right? So whether it's Slack integrations, whether it's Teams integrations, Jira, API, webhooks, we've got it all in terms of allowing a customer to customize their communications with us, but also into their back end and internal workflows as well. We've got a long list, mate.
So there's no excuse other than just, as you say, baby steps to start. But it sounds like, again, from Seek's perspective, it's quite a mature program. So it's really good to get those insights, Ryan. And again, also it's a relatively unique business, very much web facing, but also very large footprint. So again, a very important aspect of what you do. Look, Ryan LaRoche, the Deputy CISO with Seek, thank you very much for joining us today on the Bugcrowd series, and particularly for those perspectives as a CXO. And once again, Nick Mckenzie, the Chief Information and Security Officer with Bugcrowd. Thanks very much for joining us on our Tech and Sec Weekly with MySecurityTV, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it, mate.